Third string on the depth chart, stays in the block for Hedrick, who throws a deep ball for an open man. Caught, Chaz Anderson. Touchdown, Boise State.
Welcome, Bronco Nation, to another exciting video. As you can see, I have a very special guest with me today. That's because we are going to be previewing the Boise State football 2023 offense. This is the same preview series that I did last year, where I kind of broke it up and went through all the different position groups. This year, making it a little bit more simple, we're going to be previewing the offense, defense, and special teams, and having special guests, forward players coming on and discussing all three elements. And this year, for the offense, I have former Boise State quarterback Grant Hedrick with us today. Of course, all of you should be very well familiar with Grant, one of the greatest quarterbacks in Boise State history, one of only three quarterbacks for Boise State to actually go out and win a Fiesta Bowl for the program. Joins Kellen Moore and Jared Zabransky on that honored list. Grant Hedrick was a quarterback for Boise State from 2010 to 2014. He was a starter from 2013 and then the full season of 2014. He passed for 5,656 yards, had 39 touchdowns, had a 157.7 PR rating. His rushing was also impressive, 971 yards rushing, 18 touchdowns. He also added a couple of receiving touchdowns, as most Boise State quarterbacks will kind of put in that little Kellen Moore special there as well. 4 receptions for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. His 4,399 yards of total offense in 2014 are second most all-time in Boise State football history, only just behind Ryan Dinwiddie, someone who's also been a guest on this channel. His 3,695 yards passing are fifth most in a single season for Boise State, and his 70.2% completion percentage is best in all of Boise State history, beating out Kellen Moore by 0.3%. Grant, it is an honor to have you on the channel today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, we're just going to get right into it then with a personal interview section. Today, we're going to go over just a quick personal interview discussing some of the elements of Grant's career here at Boise State. We'll talk about the 2022 statistics for the Boise State offense, just a little bit of a review of what the offense did last year. Of course, it's going to be a very different animal this season with the new offensive coordinator, and we'll discuss all of that, but we'll take a quick look at what the team was able to do last season. Then we'll look at some of the newcomers on this team, some players that might be making an impact potentially as true freshmen or maybe down the road. We'll talk about the 2023 offense, breaking it down into passing game, running game, receiving, and a little bit of discussion offensive line, concluding the video with 3 keys to the season for the offense and also a short prediction section. So getting right into the personal interview section, Grant, let's talk a little bit about that 2014 season. You know, obviously the expectations that year, it was different, right? You had a new head coach for Boise State, new offensive coordinator, you got 8-5 the year before. There was a lot of stuff going on. What were your guys' mindset coming into that season from that 2013 year with you established as the starter there for Boise State?
Yeah, coming off that 2013 season, 8-5, you know, and the standards and expectations of Bronco Nation, that was not up to par. And so kind of going into my senior year and my senior class and some of those leaders, you know, we really wanted to go out on a better note. And it was a unique situation because when Coach Pete left, you know, obviously one of the best of all time at what he did. And that was rough. But then when Harsh came in, you know, that was a familiar face to a lot of us. He recruited me there. He recruited that my whole class was a part of that staff, our redshirt year, our freshman year. And so we knew having him and knew his expectations and how he did things and just being a Bronco himself, you know, that was nice to have. He understood the culture and just how unique that place is. You know, and it was just a really awesome opportunity. The transition was really easy because of that and had some really good assistants that he brought with him, you know, but I think the key to that season, looking back, you know, and at the time you don't realize it, but we very easily could have probably went 8-5 again. There were some close games, you know, that year that we kind of hung on to. You know, you go back to like the New Mexico game, we're down there and it's a shootout. It's, you know, score after score. I mean, I think they scored on their first play and then so did we on offense. And it was like a basketball score by the end of it, you know, but that was one that, you know, a year prior, we might've got beat. You know, you look ahead at San Diego State game at home, it was like 4 degrees at kickoff and we're thinking, you know, they're from San Diego. They're not going to want to be here. And they come out and they were up 20-0, you know, on us. And that was, you know, a game that we figured out a way to win. So there's a few others like that, but I think the maturity of the senior class and some of those leaders, we were able to kind of find a way to win those games, where as a year prior, we didn't get it done. So I think that was the main difference. And then once we got a little momentum, and got things rolling, it was a lot of fun. Obviously started out the season a little bit rough, me personally, like a couple bad losses, some turnovers and things like that. And then once we got things going, it was a lot of fun. But I will be the first to say, you're mentioning some of those stats and stuff, and it is cool to be mentioned in the same conversation as a Kellen Moore, as a Bransky and Dinwiddie, those guys, some of the best to ever do it, but I was really fortunate to have some amazing players around me too, and it was just kind of the perfect storm. It was that perfect group together that everyone had their role, and then we have the superstars, the JHIs that, kind of carried it. And so it was just a very unique season. And really cool way to go out. But again, I think it just is the maturity level of some of our leaders we had, and then just, kind of battle tested a little bit and finding a way to win some close games that the year prior, we didn't get done. I think too, and now that I'm kind of a fan, I guess, when you're going through it, and it's no disrespect, and I hope the standard never changes for Boise State fans, because I think, my career was kind of the tail end of, kind of the glory days, a little bit like that dynasty that they were going through, and I don't think that's over. I don't think that's stopped. But I will say that it's different, it's been a little while since they've been in a New Year's Six game, and that's the expectation that Boise State fans have. And I absolutely love that. But what I think some people may not understand, unless you're living it, is how hard it is to win at that level. Even, whether you're playing San Jose State, whether you're playing Georgia, whether you're playing Hawaii or Ole Miss or whoever it is, UW, I mean, it doesn't matter. Every team's got scholarship guys that are going to school, they're getting school paid for, that are really good players. And at any given moment, you turn it over 4 or 5 times in a game, you're going to get beat. And it's just kind of as simple as that. And it's difficult. And the amount of time that you put in to prepare and get ready for those games, and then you don't get it done on Saturday. And that's what everyone sees, is that 3.5, 4 hours on Saturday. That's how you kind of judge the season or the game or the progress of everybody. And if you don't get it done then it's like, oh man, what's going on? There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, and a lot of people know that. But it's tough. It's tough to win. It really is, no matter who you're playing. And so I don't want fans to take it for granted, because it's pretty amazing what they still have going there. It may not be the New Year's Six type seasons that they've had and BCS Bowl wins and things like that, undefeated years. It's hard to do that now. I think the rest of the conference is slowly catching up. I think the transfer portal thing has changed things dramatically. And that big red X on the calendar for Boise State is always going to be there for every team. So it's fun, and I hope that standard never changes, but it's tough. And really, for my senior year, it was fun to kind of live up to some of those standards a little bit.
You talk about it being tough to go out there and win every game, no matter who you're playing. I mean, talk about New Mexico, a team that, most times you think Boise State could go out there and win, but then the next year after you guys leave, was it 2015? They go out and they lose New Mexico at home, and you guys were really close there, and you found a way to push through. I mean, obviously a rough start to the year, 3-2 losses to Air Force, which I think in retrospect, we don't think of that quite as badly as we did at the time, because Boise State has really struggled against Air Force post your guys' term there. But at the time, 3-2, a lot of fans that I was talking to were like, yeah, season's over. What are we going to do? Maybe we get to the Mako Bowl. That's it. And you guys found a way to turn things around with close games, 51-46 versus Nevada. That was a shootout. That was a crazy game. The Fresno State game, the BYU game, you guys came on, brought the energy. That's 60-49 win versus New Mexico. That 4-degree win versus San Diego State, where you guys had to come back from a 20-point deficit. What were those conversations like mid-season? You're looking at 3-2, brand new head coach, brand new team dynamic, and you guys had to figure out a way to finish the year the way you did, which you look at Boise State seasons, historic seasons, that was probably one of the most historic, to start the way that you guys did and finish the way that you guys did. What happened? What changed to make that next level step to go out and win those tough games that could have gone either way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can remember right after the Air Force game, that was, for me, the lowest point of my athletic career. And, you know, athletes say you don't pay attention to the outside noise, right? And I would say that too. It's impossible. You're going to hear it. And I remember driving to the facility on Sunday after the game, and I listen to sports talk radio because I enjoy it. And, you know, I don't know why I was listening to it that day. I shouldn't have been. And, you know, it's, you know, Hedrick's benched, you know, he's never going to play again. Like, that's the way to go with Finley. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. Like, that was a terrible performance. Like, you're not going to win throwing 4 interceptions. And so going to the facility, and Harsh calls me into his office, and I can remember he sits me down. He's like, hey, like, if you do that again, we're going to go with you. He said, like, we trust you. You're a 5th-year guy. We know you can get it done. But if you continue to turn it over, like, you're done. Like, we just can't do it. And that was pretty much it. And then Mike Sanford, the offensive coordinator, was kind of waiting in the hallway for me. And he comes over to me, puts his arm around me. He's like, all right, man, let's go. And that was it. And that was kind of the last conversation. It was like, it's either got to happen or it's not. And for me, that was kind of the moment that kind of flipped the switch. I think for a while, and this is something that, you know, when I think we're going to talk about what it means to play quarterback at Boise State and all that. And for me, my moment changed dramatically then, because for the longest time, well, for 2 years, I was underneath the Hall of Famer, right, and Kellen Moore, and watched him prepare and how he did things and learned as much as I could. I remember as a kid watching Jared Zabransky on TV, you know, and Ryan Dinwiddie and Bart Hendricks. And you go back through the history of Boise State quarterbacks and some really amazing players. And kind of going back, I can remember before my first, when I was going to be the starter at the beginning of the year, we go down to play Ole Miss in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. And we go through the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta and tour that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm the starter for a Division I program. This is what I've been wanting to do since I was a little kid. Like, it's finally here. And I just got really emotional. And I remember calling my dad. I'm like almost in tears, and, you know, go out and don't play very good that game. But I remember trying to probably be someone I wasn't, like trying to play the position like Kellen Moore or like a Jared Zabransky and live up to those expectations. In reality, like, I was my own player, and I needed to find what I was good at and not try to be someone else. And so when I had that meeting with Harsh after the Air Force game, and it was kind of time, it was like, hey, you either got to get it done or we're going another direction. I kind of said, well, it's a bad word. And then the second word is it. And the first word starts with F, right? So that was my mentality. It was like, I had nothing to lose. I had to go out and just have fun. And so I remember Monday at practice after it was the Nevada week, right after Air Force, that was my mentality. And I had fun. I was playing loose. And because I didn't have anything to lose at that point, it was either like, I'm either going to play better or I'm not, and I'm not going to go out like this. And that energy, I think I was kind of a pretty reserved guy. I didn't say a whole lot, but I was able to kind of create some excitement. And I'm actually talking trash, and I'm having fun, and I'm excited on a touchdown pass in 7-on-7 in practice. Like, that energy kind of bled off to the other guys, and everyone kind of got on the same page, and it was just fun. And we all knew that's how it had to be. And so to create your own energy and just be our own model of whatever we were, and not be like the teams in the past, that was kind of the changing point.
Well, you guys did. You went out and had fun the rest of the season. I mean, that New Mexico game, I know it was a close one, but you talk about having fun out there. I think you won the Mountain West Player of the Week the next weekend there. 6 touchdowns, 4 passing, 2 rushing. It was one of the most impressive performances I've seen by a Boise State quarterback. I had a blast watching it. I try to rewatch that game every year because it's really exciting one to go watch. But you guys had fun the rest of the year, and it showed on the field. Going up to the Fiesta Bowl, where you guys have put yourself in a position, you get selected, you're going to the New Year's Six game versus Arizona. I know we're going to talk about what it's like playing the quarterback position at Boise State, but you just talk about being a player on this team, the history of what Boise State has done at that FBS level, the Fiesta Bowl wins that they've gone out and won, the win versus Oklahoma, the win versus TCU, being a top-tier team in the country that everybody knows about. What was it like approaching that Fiesta Bowl game where you know you're going to be one of those teams that go down in Boise State history? What was it like preparing for and approaching that game with the legacy of the previous teams, especially those two previous Fiesta Bowl winning teams, hanging over you guys to go out there and get that win?
Yeah, it was an amazing opportunity. And I remember kind of right after we beat Utah State, I think in the regular season, the last regular season game of that year, that was kind of a big game. They were pretty good. And that was going to kind of decide who was going to play in the Mountain West Championship against someone from the West. And we win that one. And then it was the Mountain West Championship against Fresno. And the talk has started about, you know, if we can get this done, we're likely going to be in a New Year's Six game. And that was the ultimate goal. That's a reason why guys go there, because you're going to have an opportunity to play in one of those games. If you win enough and you win your conference, you're going to have a shot at playing in a big time bowl game. And so that's one of the reasons why we went to Boise State, you know, is to play in a game like that, and to have watched the two previous Fiesta Bowls. And, you know, I think the week leading up to, right before we were leaving, I like to watch old games, and I was watching the 2001 Fiesta Bowl, and I was like, holy smokes, we're going to be in that game. You know, I think that was for the national championship back in the BCS days, but, you know, it was surreal. You know, the moment definitely didn't seem too big for us. And, you know, it definitely helps when Jay scores on the fifth play of the game, and, you know, it's like, okay, here we go. Let's just keep things rolling. And, but what an amazing atmosphere, and just to be kind of back in that game, you know, watching all those growing up and to be living it and playing in it, just an unbelievable experience. And I just remember, you know, winning that, and I was on the sideline. Obviously our defense got a stop towards the end. And I just remember watching the clock. You know, Solomon got sacked for Arizona. I think Kamale Correa got him. And I just remember looking at the clock, and I was like, holy smokes, this thing needs to go fast. Can the seconds keep ticking? And then it hit all 4 zeros. And it was just like, oh my gosh. I just stood there and just kind of looked around, and finally was able to take it all in. And something I'll never forget. One of the best moments, I think, for me there.
Did you guys, you guys ran the Statue of Liberty in that game. It felt like the previous Fiesta Bowls where you were putting in that energy and you were living up to that moment. Did you guys watch those games when you were preparing for the Fiesta Bowl? Was that something that you guys had on your mind and you were thinking about?
Yeah, we watched it for sure. Not in a structured meeting or anything, but I would get the player. We'd watch it in the meeting rooms and stuff. And I think the big thing that we went over, so the first play of the game we ran was the very first play that they ran against TCU in the 2010 Fiesta Bowl. So if you look that up, it's the same exact concept, where there's a deep post and then an in route by our number 2 receiver. And Kellen throws the deep ball, I think, to Titus, and overthrows him by just a little bit. And so we're going to run that first play. So the whole thought process was, let's go out with a shot right at the beginning, just like we did in 2010. And Arizona played it, so their safety got really deep. They took it away, and then they hit Spurbeck kind of on a dig route, and he made a great catch. But that was the mentality. It was like, we're going to go and just unload and just do whatever we have to do. I think the play script, the play sheet for that week, there was over 100 plays in. We just had everything ready to go. And then, you know, the Statue of Liberty, Coach Harsin is an amazing preparer for offenses, and Mike Sanford did a great job that year too. But those plays that you run, Statue of Liberty, you know, the Philly special thing, you know, that Kellen caught, and then I caught one against Fresno. Those were specifically scripted for certain situations. So if we're on the right hash 7-yard line, we can call that. If we're on the 11 left hash, we can do the statue. So it's there's certain thing, and it just happened. Okay, it's first down. We're on this hash. We're on the right yard line. Let's call it. And, you know, luckily it worked. I think the Statue of Liberty in our Fiesta Bowl was cool, but it, you know, wasn't like the first one, obviously. But Jay, that he made that play. He made that run so nice. It wasn't like we fooled him. He just was better.
I think he broke 2 or 3 tackles on his way. That's how he was. Talking about playing the position for Boise State, you've mentioned that a little bit already, but you said great names, you know, Bart Hendricks, Kellen Moore, Jared Zabransky, so many guys that have come before, and now you get recruited to Boise State. You sit under Kellen for a couple of years there, and then you're under Joe, and then unfortunate situation, injury there in the Nevada game. You are called to the plate. You're the quarterback. You're stepping up to play on the blue versus a rival team there in Nevada that we hate so much for good reason. And you are stepping up to play as the Boise State quarterback. What is that like? What is that? Just kind of talk me through what that's like to play the position for probably the toughest position in all the group of five is the Boise State quarterback because the legacy of what's gone before you. Can you talk about what that's like?
Yeah, it's definitely unique. And I think in the state of Idaho, probably a close second behind the head coach of Boise State football is the quarterback, of Boise State in terms of like eyes on you and people always seeing what you're doing and fairly popular. And so for me, it was really nice to see and to be under Kellen for 2 years because he handled it amazing, right? And extremely humble. You would never know he was where he was at, just how he carried himself. He was an amazing person. And so I took a lot of that from him. And I think, obviously he had an amazing career and because of that, due to that, he was an amazing preparer. He went into every single week, extremely ready to go. And so it took a lot of work behind the scenes. And I remember him having a conversation with me when I kind of just got there. He's like, you're going to spend, if you want to be really good, you got to spend a lot of lonely hours in the office. And I didn't really know what that meant at first. And then as I started getting into, okay, I might be the starter or I am starting, I realized that you have to put a lot of time in that not a lot of guys do, just because of the position that you play. And so you have to be ready for every situation. And so you really don't have much time to think about it. You're kind of just, if you're doing it the right way, you're just working and you're doing a lot of things behind the scenes and you're basically living at the facility more than you are your own home. And so it's definitely a unique position. I think it's really cool because there's no pro team in Idaho. Boise State football is it. Like that's the big ticket on Saturdays. And, the national attention that they get is always going to be there. And so to have that, be in that role and be in that position, it's very unique. But the other thing too is a lot of guys, and it's even more common now, is it's hard because there's only one on the field at a time, right? Receivers, you can rotate in, there's 3 or 4 at a time. Running backs, there's rotation a little bit. But the quarterback, there's one guy, and so when you're the backup or you're the third string or even a 4th string guy, you never really feel like you're a part of it yet. And I kind of felt that a little bit. I knew I would get my chance if I kept, working hard and just stuck it out. But it was difficult. And then once you get that opportunity, you have to make it count. And I was really fortunate in an unfortunate situation in that Nevada game to get my chance and, went through some ups and downs, but it was, I think I did good enough to at least, keep playing, for the next year and a half. And I can remember that game too, because this is exactly what I'm talking about is you just never know when your time is going to get called. And that week really leading up to that, I would have, some read option type stuff where I'd go in the game and run the ball or, have a little package for me in the offense just to kind of keep me interested, I think. And that week I was like, gosh, I only have I think there was one speed option play that I had in that game plan. And so talking to my parents and stuff, they're at the game and I'm like, I'm probably not going to play. Like there's only one package that I have this game and it's probably not going to happen. And then first play of the game, boom, Joe breaks his ankle. And then you're in and you don't have any time to think about it. You just got to go and play and trust your preparation and trust what you've been doing. But really like you want to prepare like a starter when you're a backup, but there's nothing like actually being the starter. Like it's totally different. And so once you get that opportunity, it's definitely changes for you. But then, after that is just handling some attention, handling some distractions and the media things you got to do. And that all comes with it, but you're kind of the face of the program. Like I said, probably second behind the head coach. And so it's kind of a fun experience. I have a lot more fun looking back on it now than I did when I was playing. I didn't want to do all the extra stuff when I was playing. I just wanted to play ball. But looking back, I wish that I would have taken advantage a little bit more of that opportunity and just had fun with it, because it truly is a really unique experience. And I was also really fortunate to be able to stick out the first 3.5 years and not transfer, don't leave. And I think, that conversation I talked about with Hars after the Air Force game, where he's like, okay, we're going with you, but if you do this again, you're done. No offense to those other quarterbacks. We were really, really young in that room that year. I think the second oldest was Tommy Stewart, who was a sophomore. And then you got Ryan Finley, who's a redshirt freshman. And then we had Alex Ogle, who's a redshirt that year. I mean, there wasn't much else at that point that I don't think they felt like those guys were quite ready. So I got kind of lucky with that too. Because if there was somebody else that was really good behind me, I probably wouldn't have had another shot. But it was an amazing experience.
Well, amazing experience playing at Boise State. The last question here is there a game or a moment? You kind of talked a little bit about it already as we've gone through, but is there a game or moment that stands out to you? I mean, obviously you had that Nevada game where you come in. I can tell you as a fan watching that game, and Joe goes out, already the season was kind of off to a rough start already. It didn't feel like it was going to be one of those historic years, but coming into that game, I personally was thinking, as long as we beat Nevada, I don't care what else happens this season. Then Joe hurts himself, and I'm like, that's it. Who else is out there? I mean, we don't know this guy, Grant. We're done. And I think it was your second, because your first drive was kind of a typical guy get thrown on the field. I don't think it was much, but your second or third drive, you did something. I think you had a big run or something like that, and I went, whoa, we're in good hand. We're good to go the rest of the time. And then there were some other great games throughout your time at Boise State. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we move into looking at this Boise State team that stands out to you, a memory or a moment that you want to share with the fans watching before we move into talking about this Boise State 2022 team?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I think the big games was Nevada, obviously getting my shot. Nevada the second year, my second year starting in 2014, because that was right after Air Force. Just kind of like a little bit of a relief that we won that one, played okay. And then the Fiesta Bowl win, and something I'll never forget, for the fans. And it was probably the only time where I really took it in was we wake up early after the Fiesta Bowl win and go to the airport to leave to go back to Boise, and the amount of fans that were in the airport, and just we're going crazy. And it was early, and, half of us had a good time after the game. And so we're still a little groggy, and it was just so cool to see that, and just to understand that we were a part of something that made people's day and made their life, to experience that with us. And, as a player, you selfishly take all of that and think it's all you, but it really takes that whole community and that whole state and everybody that supports the program. And so really appreciate that, and the amount of fan support. And that was a moment that I realized, like, this is a lot bigger than just us. There's a lot of people, they wait their entire work week to go to a game, or they save up, to buy a ticket and to go to the Fiesta Bowl. And, a lot of sacrifice from a lot of people. And that was really cool to see. And just to realize that then, was special.
Well, thanks. That's great discussion. We're going to move on to the 2022 statistical review. Thanks so much for sharing those times, your moments. Really get a real in-depth look into what was a very special season for Boise State there in 2014. Talking about special seasons, this upcoming year, 2023, has potential to be one of those. And 2022 was not a bad year for Boise State, especially, we talk about similarities, right? You're coming off of a rough year the year before, that 2021 season, not how fans wanted to see the year go out. There's a lot of things that happened that year. And then we move into this season, the 2022. It's, again, another rough start. You open up with losses against teams that you definitely shouldn't be losing to. And then you come out and finish, but Boise State comes out and finishes the season strong, similar to the way that 2014 season went. So let's talk about that 2022 season and how things went down. 2022, statistically, it was a pretty middling year. But again, when you're taking into account all these stats, let's consider the fact that, one, you had an offensive coordinator change a third of the way through the season and a brand new quarterback third of the way through the season. Things started very differently how they finished. So when you're talking about statistics overall, these are cumulative statistics. Definitely, I think, a better year than what the stats show. But 29.4 points per game, which was 58th in the country, which was an improvement slightly from 2021. 49 total touchdowns, up from 39 total touchdowns the year before. Third down efficiency was 39.79%. again, 58th in the country, so middling of the pack there. 2,668 yards passing. Again, a little bit of a different offense there, second half of the year. New quarterback getting the reins. And then 2,746 yards rushing. That was the big number. 196.1 yards per game, 29th in the country, fifth most among non-option group of 5 teams. And that was a huge leap from 2021, where Boise State struggled to move the ball altogether, 1,466 yards in 2021. It was a weird year. Tim Plow fired after the 4th game. Hank Bachmeier leaves the team, and they're 2-2. They're averaging 22 points per game before the transition, and then 32.5 points per game after that transition occurred. So like I said, when I talk about completely different teams in the second half of the year, Boise State absolutely fits that number. 0 games with 200-plus yards rushing before the transition, 3 games with over 300 yards rushing. The first time in Boise State FBS history that they've had 3 300-yard rushing games in a performance, and it included back-to-back dual 100-yard rushers. It was first in school history. Talk to me about your perspective there looking at 2022 season and what stands out to you.
Yeah, I think, there, like you said, I think there's a lot of similarities from my experiences there in 2013 going into 14. Some transition with coaches, some transition with key players, but they found a way to kind of battle it out and be really successful. And, I love the standard and expectations of Bronco Nation and the fans. And I know that they want those undefeated seasons and things like that. But there was a lot of really good things in 2022. I think, looking back, probably the best thing for Taylor Green was to get that experience. I think that's going to be huge for him moving forward. But it showed that there's a lot of playmakers in the field, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that they're going to be able to do some things. And I think especially the quarterback position, kind of getting your feet wet in those games and be able to find ways to win. That's all that matters. That's the only stat that matters, for quarterbacks is to get a win. And whether that's on the ground or if you're throwing it, he found a way to do it and get it done and to be productive. And so really cool how they responded from the early kind of transitions and issues they were having, and finding a way to end the year on a really positive note. I think that momentum is going to carry them forward. And really, it was a really fun team to watch, last year. As a fan now, I watch it differently. And I think it was really enjoyable, and I'm excited to continue to watch them this year.
There are definitely some standout players from that 2022 season. You've talked about Taylor Green already, coming in as a freshman, 2,042 yards passing, 14 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 586 yards rushing, a long of 91, 10 touchdowns on the ground. He took Bronco Nation by storm. You talk about someone coming in halfway through the season, kind of like you did there in that 2013 season. An unknown, there were some signs, and we'd seen him at the beginning of the year there versus Oregon State, and he was pretty exciting. There's a lot of raw talent. Seeing his development from the beginning of the year to the end of the year was incredible, but he wasn't the only guy. Of course, you had George Talani, who's been a stand-up back for Boise State despite some injuries. Another 1,000-yard season for him, 5.2-yard average, 10 touchdowns. Ashton Genty, 821 yards, pretty close to a 1,000-yard season for him. Both those backs adding yards in the receiving game as well. And then the receiving game was also a little bit of one that was a little bit of an unknown coming to that year, because you'd lost your main guy, in Khalil Shakir. So who was going to step up? And you saw not really one guy step up, but multiple guys step up, and really more of a spread passing game versus focusing on one player. Caples, Bowens, Cobbs, McAllister, another freshman face that is exciting for the future. Talking about these guys, and there's many we haven't mentioned, who stands out to you as a player that you thought had a year that was maybe better than expectations or really stood out to you in 2022? You've already talked about Taylor Green a little bit. Was there anybody else that you looked at and were like, they impressed me in 2022?
Yeah, I think both those running backs you mentioned are really fun to watch and are really special. One guy that really caught my attention kind of towards the tail end of the year was Ashton Genty. I thought he's special, and a really good compliment to Helani. I think both those guys in the backfield, and then you combine the quarterback, who's probably one of the more elite runners, in the conference and probably in the country in that position as well. Like that's a scary group back there. And then, I think receiver by committee, those guys did a really good job. And I'm biased with that group because my old roommate and buddy, Matt Miller's the receivers coach. And so he talks about them and works pretty hard with those guys. But I think, Caples, Bowens, Cobbs, McAllister, you mentioned, all four of those guys will be fun to have back. But really as a whole, it wasn't a one-man show, and I think that's a positive thing moving forward, where a lot of those guys did some really good things, and a lot of them are coming back. And so it's kind of fun to see that progression. And, everyone kind of had their moments in different games where they stepped up. And so I think that'll be really good moving forward as well.
Well, and it's not just guys that are coming back, but it's new faces that are adding to the team as we transition to the 2023 side of this preview. And you have a little bit of a unique perspective here as a quarterback, as a coach yourself here in high school. So getting to see some of these players on their tape as they go through from their developmental stage. But Boise has some exciting newcomers, and I did a whole video talking about every single one that came through at the time, at least in that signing class. I'll put the link in the description. Definitely go back and watch that. There's highlights from each and every one of them, and I review and analyze each in depth. So I'm not going to do that in this video, but I will mention a couple of names that stood out to me. C.J. Tiller was the big quarterback for this class here, quarterback out of California, 3-star, 40th in his position. Jean-Bray Dubar has a lot of people excited. He's a big guy, 6 foot, 190 pounds, is already drawing some Ashton Genty type comparisons of what he's put forward so far. So a lot of fans may be saying he has a chance to step up and do something this year like Genty did last season. Wide receiver, you got Chase Penry coming in from Colorado. So he's got FBS experience at the Power 5 level, part of that great distribution of Colorado players that has happened recently. But I think he'll be able to come and do something here for Boise State, guy who can contribute right away. And then offensive line, we'll talk about. That's been a struggle for Boise State. We'll talk about that towards the end of the video. But a guy I'm excited here is a local guy, Meridian kid, Idaho, offensive tackle Carson Rasmussen here. I'm excited to see what he can do. He has some exciting tape as well. So not necessarily people I named, but it can be. Is there anybody that of this recruiting class that you've looked at for Boise State, or maybe some of the new names have been added recently that stands out to you? Anybody you think has a chance to make an impact right away, or that you're excited for as being maybe a standout player for Boise State in the future?
Yeah, those guys you mentioned, obviously on my list as well. I like the receiver from Florida, Jackson. Is it Greer? Might have said it wrong. He's kind of I don't think he was super highly recruited, but kind of under the radar a little bit. And those are kind of the guys that are intriguing, that seem to do well at Boise for whatever reason. And I kind of like watching his film. Seems to do a good job. And then another Oregon guy, tight end Oliver Fisher, big body, athletic. I think the tight end position has always tried to been a staple there for the Broncos, and I hope that he can kind of get involved with that group. But again, watching CJ on film, everyone, again, that's the spotlight position, right? And everyone thinks it's the next prodigy and the next Kellen Moore. And, I don't think he's Kellen Moore. I think he's really special. I think he's going to be really, really good. And again, that's one of those positions. It's unique. You don't play right away. And are you patient enough to work your way up to that starting role? And when you got Taylon Green, that's going to be there for, for a while, that could be difficult, but I like watching him on film. He's definitely been coached well. His fundamentals are really good. He's obviously has the ability to move and throw outside the pocket. And then when you watch his film, the one thing that I noticed that I was really, really impressed with was when he's able to take a drop back, just straight drop back, not under pressure. Kind of his base and his footwork is really polished. And that is something that not a lot of high school quarterbacks have coming out. Usually that takes a little while at the college level to develop, and he's kind of already got that. So he's had some really good coaching. I think that's going to be fun to watch. And then that running back from Texas, DeBar, I think he's going to be special. And to kind of add him in the mix, and that new rule where you can play, was it 4 games and still redshirt, that changes things a lot too, where you can get some guys some playing time and still save a year, that's really good. And I think that'll be really beneficial for a lot of these guys that you kind of mentioned that will hopefully get some experience. And then if they're ready, let's roll with them. If not, let's develop them for another season. And then you got, 4 more. So it's an exciting class coming in. I think, obviously they should be the number 1 recruiting class in the conference, every year. And so a lot of talent coming in, and now it's just a matter of, can you mold them into what they want as Boise State players? And I think the coaching staff there has the similar belief, and it's the recruitment and the commitment and signing your letter of intent is more of a marriage, where it's going to be a process instead of you're going to play right away. If you don't, you can transfer. I don't think that's necessarily their mentality. And so with these guys coming in, I think that is going to be a really good factor for them.
Well, this is an exciting year for Boise State because it's not just the new guys coming in. It's the guys, like we said, that are coming back, not counting the 2020 season because that was a weird year with COVID. Everybody ended up coming back in college football. But this is the first time since the 2010 season that Boise State returns their top passer, their 3 top rushers, and their 4 top receivers since that 2010 season. So they're returning all of those guys. 75% of last year's offensive yards are coming back. That is huge for Boise State because there was a lot of fresh faces, a lot of new players. We talked about Taylor Green getting that experience, but he wasn't the only one. There are a lot of other guys, McAllister, Genty, a lot of new guys that got to see the field and make a direct, immediate impact. And now they're coming in seasoned with that experience under their belt. This is going to be an exciting year for Boise State. Let's talk about the passing game first off, and let's go through the passing game, rushing game, receiving game, and offensive line, and have some discussion about what we expect this 2023 team to do. So, for the passing game, there's no quarterback battle here. Taylor Green, he's got the starting job, obviously, and he has the potential to be one of the all-time greats at Boise State. And you talk about true raw talent. I don't know if we've ever seen a quarterback like Taylor Green come to Boise State. So it's going to be exciting to watch. But the big question for us off the bat here is who ends up backing him up, because he's an athletic quarterback. He runs a lot. Things can happen. That next guy up, it's always been important for Boise State. You've seen it yourself. That next guy up mentality is always really important, especially when you have a quarterback who likes to move his legs around the field. Who do you think maybe takes that backup position there for Boise State? Because there's not a lot of guys that we've seen get a ton of experience or coming in with a lot of experience under their belt. There's been a lot of transfers. So who do you think potentially takes that backup role after Taylor?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And that's one of those positions where obviously Talon's kind of a unique person with he was able to figure it out really fast. You don't really know until you get thrown out there of whether you can handle it or not. And I think the big thing for a backup is having the knowledge of the game plan, understanding of the game plan to be able to go out and operate like a starter. And so I think really whoever that is, I'm not even sure. I think athletically and skill wise, I think they all probably could do it. I think it's just a matter of who is going to be trusted the most, if that were to happen, can you go in and operate like a starter? Seeing Taylor on film, he's got the tools, he's got the skill to do it. It's just a matter of how fast can you pick it up. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think he graduated early, right? He was there for spring ball. Yeah. So that definitely helps too. You're getting an entire spring ball of offensive install. You have your whole summer there, that's going to definitely help his development. But really with any of those guys, it's just going to be a matter of who can pick it up the fastest.
Yeah, I mean, it is a young class, like you said. It's kind of a similar situation to where you were at in that 2014 season, because you got an experienced guy in yourself. But this year, we don't even have an experienced guy. It's Taylor Green, redshirt sophomore, and then you've got the freshman CJ Tiller, the redshirt freshman Maddox Madsen, and the redshirt sophomore Colt Fulton. I don't know if I've ever seen a younger quarterback room at Boise State. Usually you have that experienced, weathered 4-year, 5-year vet there who is doing that leadership in the quarterback room. It's going to be an interesting one to watch during the offseason here as Boise State approaches that first game. Who ends up taking that backup spot? You've got a bunch of young guys, but the good news here is that whoever ends up being that backup, they're behind a great quarterback here in Taylor Green, and barring injury, Boise State's offense should be in strong hands. I think based on what we saw last year, my money would be on Maddox Madsen. He had a really good spring ball. He has some really great freshman tape that was very exciting recruit. There was even some discussion of maybe he's going to be the guy that steps up and takes the starting role there before Taylor Green ended up exploding the way that he did. So it was an interesting discussion as far as who's going to take that backup role, but I think probably Maddox Madsen probably gets that start. But CJ Tiller, another exciting prospect for Boise State in the future. But we talk about Taylor Green being that quarterback for Boise State. He's got to be the guy because there's not anybody behind you that can step up if you have a bad game. There's not really anybody who can step up behind you if you're not able to complete the picture. And that's the big one for Taylor this year is can he complete the picture? He has a lot of raw talent. He's got a powerful arm. He's got great legs, but and he definitely, when you talk about improvements from beginning of the year in that Oregon State game to the end of the year, what you saw him do as far as project the progression and the rate of improvement was absolutely incredible. One of the most impressive complete picture transitions I've seen out of a player at Boise State ever. But can he complete that? He's still a little bit uncomfortable in the pocket, which is understandable considering Boise State's offensive line. He still has a tendency to do a little bit of that hero ball, to force it when he doesn't need to. What is it that he needs to do to complete that picture, to round out his picture as a quarterback here for Boise State? And do you think he's going to be able to come into the 2023 season at that rounded level, or does he still have another year of developing before we really see his true potential?
Yeah, I think just having the offseason to work on some of those things is going to be really helpful for him. I think when you come in like he did, your legs will get you out of a lot of bad situations. And sometimes you rely on that a little bit too much. And you don't have to be the most polished passer to be successful and to move the chains when you have that ability. But what Bush Hamden's going to do a good job with this offseason. And, he's a disciple and played for, Coach Pete and under Harse and some really good offensive minds that can coach quarterbacks really well. I think he's going to bring to the table some really good development skills for Talon, and to be able to kind of just polish up his pass game a little bit and to calm his feet in the pocket. And it's something I think all running quarterbacks have a problem with, is sometimes get the happy feet a little bit back there. And so I think when he settles those down and, the game will slow down, the more experience that he gets, the passing game will come together. I think it's just all about timing and rhythm and just being comfortable and not relying on his legs as much. But I think, like I said, that is something that's going to get him out of a lot of trouble. And he's going to utilize those and be extremely explosive. And if he can kind of combine that with the balance of, okay, I'm going to stay in the pocket and go through progressions, I think that is missing. Well, I wouldn't say missing piece, but a piece that he'll continue to develop and get better at. And then I think he'll be more of a complete quarterback.
You talk about what's going to get in there to that next level. And I think a big part of that is having that new offensive coordinator there in Bush Hamden, former quarterback himself, understands the game. Dirk Cutter was incredible, but he stepped into a role that was an emergency situation. It wasn't something that he was saying, "Hey, I'm ready to be here." We need you. He stepped up to the plate, but we're bringing in a guy who has been around the game a long time. He's ready to go. He's excited to be here at this moment. He's been developing this quarterback over the offseason. What kind of impact does the offensive coordinator have on the quarterback itself? I mean, you went through that. You transitioned from a new offensive coordinator there when Stanford came in your 2014 season. Is there a major impact that you complete different level of play, offensive coordinator to offensive coordinator? Or is it more of taking what the quarterback already has and developing that a little bit? I mean, what kind of role does the offensive coordinator have in directly developing what the quarterback's potential is?
Yeah, I think you said it correctly. I think the best way to do it is for the coordinator to come in and see what kind of tools you have to work with, and then work with that. I thinking back, I think I had 4 coordinators when I was there, and each one's a little bit different, and it was really good experience. And I think that experience will help Talon as well, going from one to another in that transition. I guess this will be his third technically. But you're gonna learn something from each one and kind of put into your game. And I think the biggest thing right now is with Coach Hamden coming in, an entire offseason with him, going through how he wants to develop quarterbacks. He played the position himself. He's coached it really well for a long time. And to be able to kind of gel with the quarterbacks in that room, that's huge. I remember when Mike Sanford came in, there was just a connection that we had, him and I, that was just amazing. And if you can get that, and it doesn't always happen, but if they can get that connection where they're speaking the same language and they work with each other on the things that you're good at, things that you got to work on, and putting that all together, that is when teams are extremely successful. I know, when Kellen was going through, he had Harsh for a while, and then he had Brent Pease, and he worked really well with those guys. So you got to be able to communicate with each other and have the ability to, as Talon needs to do, is, hey, I don't feel comfortable with this concept. Can we change this? And, to not have egos where this is how we're going to do it. This is the only way or the highway, and that doesn't necessarily work. And so, but I think knowing Bush Hamdan, I think he'll do a really good job of developing those guys and make them feel comfortable and be able to operate how they should.
An interesting point to look at is that Boise State offenses, regardless of who's offensive coordinator, regardless of who's playing quarterback, the offenses have been generally similar in terms of big emphasis on the passing game. You have kind of a one running back that you have, that's your power back. And then you have the passing game, that's really your bulwark of the offense. We have something very different right now with Boise State. You got, first off, we're going to talk about it here in a second. We talk about the rushing game, but you have two running backs that you can put out there 50-50, and they're both going to be your power backs. And you really can't just go one because they both bring something to the table. And now you have a quarterback who, while he has the arm and the potential to be that pocket quarterback, it would almost be a waste of his talent and his ability to just go with a typical, little bit more pass-heavy attack. What do you think is going to look at with this offense? What do you think Bush Hamdan is going to do potentially? Is he going to try and go a little bit more what Tim Plow was trying to do with the air raid style, or are we going to see Boise State maybe transition to something we've never seen before here for the offense?
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of a mix of some of the past offenses of Boise State. You go through the Kellen Moore era. It was more of a traditional huddle up, shift in motion, drop back pass, play action stuff with a really good run game, and then transition into some of the spread RPO type stuff. And then there was a couple years where it was kind of a mix of two that one didn't really work much better than the other. It was kind of weird. I think what Bush Hamdan will bring is he's going to probably see he's got a lot of options, and I think you can rely on a lot of different possibilities. And so I'm excited to see it because of how many weapons they have. You think of both of those running backs that played last year in Helani and Genty, they're amazing. And then you add in Green's ability to run. As a defense, you have to stop that first. You're going to get beat if you don't stop the run game with all three of those guys, which will then open up a lot of the pass game as well. And so I think there's going to be a lot more of, the RPO type stuff that will fit into Taylon's ability really well. They'll utilize his legs, but I think it's going to be a lot of that physical downhill run game that we've seen. And then kind of a mix of some of the RPO spread stuff. And then, the Boise State way of how many ways can we run this one play at a different formation, some shifts in motions and make it look different, but with the guys up front, have them be comfortable with what they're running, and I think that'll be kind of what we see, which will be fun.
Well, you talk about those different weapons and trying to interweave them into the offense. You have a unique opportunity here to interweave multiple backs because of Helani's decision to come back. I think for some people that was a surprise. It was something I was advocating for, was for him to come back, but a lot of people looked at what Genty did and what Helani had done and said, hey, Helani's NFL ready. Let him go to NFL, and Genty's going to be able to step in and take that place. And Helani made the decision to come back, put one more healthy season under his belt before he makes the jump to the NFL. Before we discuss a little bit about what that means for the offense, what it's going to look like having those two historic backs for Boise State, because I really do think that you have a moment here. It reminds me of those 2009, 2010 teams, where you had, when you look at the 2018, where you had Ian Johnson, Doug Martin, and Jeremy Avery all on the same team together. I mean, that is probably the only time I can really compare where you've had two backs both playing at elite levels that are able to come in and be either starter, you're good to go. Jeremy Avery or Doug Martin, either of them you can go with. And I think we've got something similar here. Do you think that it was a mistake for Helani to not make the jump to the NFL when he could have? Running game, that's, as a running back, that's a hard one. Injury can happen anytime. Or do you think that in the long run, it's going to benefit him down the road? You had a similar situation here, Ajayi 2014 season. He could have played one more year. I don't think he should have. I think he made the right decision with that knee, his issues. I got a similar thing bone on bone going on, so I understand what he's going through. But do you think that Helani made the right choice to come back here and play one more year for Boise State?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. And I think, I think it is. I think it's the right decision. And I think that goes to show the type of culture that is there. I think if that place wasn't going to continue to develop him and take care of him, and the brotherhood there wasn't very good, there's really no reason to stay. But I think what he sees is there's a lot left on the table, and this has the potential to be a very fun year for him to go out and be successful. I think he kind of saw that. That's what I'm guessing. And let's do this one more time. So I think it's an awesome decision. I don't know him personally. I don't know what his other opportunities would be. But I do know that I think this offense is extremely special, especially with him back there. I think it changes things a lot if he didn't come back.
Well, it's going to be a very different looking offense because you now have two genuine, could start anywhere in the group of five and even a lot of places in the Power Five backs there in the offense in Helani and Genty. How do you think that's going to run? Do you think Helani is going to maintain the starting lead there? Do you think you're going to see maybe more of a 50-50 back where really there isn't any clear-cut starter and they're really just interchanging them? Or how do you think Bush Ham's going to run this with two backs? It's a problem, but it's a great problem to have. You've really got two guys that you could work either one and have success with.
Yeah, that is a really good problem to have. And I think he'll be creative in how he wants to get those guys in the game and have them both, kind of carry the load equally. But I think too, whoever's feeling it, whoever's rolling is going to continue to play, and if they're going, then let's just keep riding them. But I think he'll get creative with getting them both in the mix and getting them, fairly equal touches. And they both bring a little different style to the game. So whatever they're trying to do offensively, they can complement that. And, I think what will be a really big factor to the success of those guys is how well that front five can gel together, the O-line. That'll be something that will need to happen fairly quickly. And they're going to get tested really fast going up to Seattle week 1 with that, but yeah, I think he'll be creative in getting both those guys a lot of touches.
Do you see Boise State producing 2,000-yard backs this season?
Man, that would be special. I think it definitely could happen. I don't know. The only thing that I think would take away with it is I think Talen's probably going to run for 600 also, at least. So, I think if you don't have that, then for sure those guys are going to run for 1,000 each. But I think with Green back there, he might steal some yardage away from one of those.
I agree hands down. I think that you're going to see, I'm saying probably because Helani's a senior, he's more experienced, he's done his time, he's made a big move here coming back. I think Boise State definitely sticks with him as a starter because honestly, for me, like I said, I could throw either of them in there, but I've got to put the nod to, I think, the senior coming back, the leader on the team. He probably gets to start, but I think what you end up seeing is one back comes in, he goes out for a breather, the next guy comes in, starts having success, and you just keep him in there until he gets stopped and you throw the next guy back. I cannot imagine a defense having to face those two guys, power backs coming down, who can also act in the receiving game. They're both fast and agile. It's an incredible opportunity for Boise State offense. But who do you think gets that third look? Because we saw that last year, that it wasn't just two guys. I mean, you also had Noah stepping up. You get Tyler Crow at times. Boise State is not just a 1 or 2 back team anymore. They've got a deep roster here. They've got Dudley, who was a potential guy that saw some opportunities. You've got Dubar, the new freshman coming in, Tyler Crow, who's put in his time. Who do you think ends up solidifying themselves as that third option? Because, like you said, the way the offense was ran last year, and it will be different this year, but Boise State didn't just run 2. There was a third guy who was also getting significant carries throughout the game.
Yeah, that's very true. I think, I like Tyler Crow, the Idaho kid, and has put his time in. I think they'll give him some love with some experience and things like that. And then I really think Dubar is special. I think that he's going to have the ability to make some impact quick. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. If he can figure it out, he might be a guy that is a factor early on. But yeah, you're right. Who's that third guy going to be? Time will tell, I guess. But there's always kind of that one guy that gets in there and has some success for him, it seems like.
I mean, personally, any 3 of those guys I'd be happy with, but just as a fan watching the game, it's always exciting when you see a true freshman get action, because then you start chomping at the bit, thinking about the future of what that means. Personally, I'm not saying my money's on it, but my heart is saying I would love to see Dubar. But also, I even if Tyler Crow doesn't get that third spot, I got to see Tyler Crow eat. He has that kind of Van Buren-esque, power back mentality. You walk on, you earned a scholarship. I love his mentality. I love his personality. And I want to see him get playing time as well. So I think you'll see him mixed in, a leader on this team who's put his time in. So it's exciting. Talking about the running game, great opportunities. But we talk about the receiving game, things are a little bit less clear. Running game, you've got 2 clear-cut guys that are going to be your starters. Genty and Helani, you're going with one of those or both of those guys. The receiving game, there wasn't that much cleared up last year. You didn't have one guy separate themselves as that number one receiver for Boise State. And Boise State's really always had that. They've always had kind of that one guy, whether it was Matt Miller or Spurbeck or or Titus Young or whoever. There was always that one guy who stepped up and was the receiver for Boise State. So who do you think claims that number one spot? Or do you think that we're not going to see that this year? It's going to be something more like last year where you have multiple guys across the board. Just to throw some names out at you, we've already talked about them already. You've got the giant McAllister, 6'4", tallest receiver of the guys we're going to mention here. And then Bowens, Cobbs, Caples, all 6 foot or 6'1". Penry, the guy's coming from Colorado, Power 5 experience. He's 6'1". And then some newer guys that we haven't seen much from, but there's a lot of talk about. Ben Ford, Orson Bolt, or maybe somebody else. Do you see any of these guys stepping up to be that number one, or do you see Boise State kind of spreading it around a little bit more this year like we did last season?
Yeah, I think, last year was kind of receiver by committee a little bit. I think there's going to be someone that's going to be the number one. I don't know who that's going to be. I can't quite answer that question, but I think they'll figure it out, and kind of how traditionally they've done it is they find out who that guy is pretty early on, and then they design things and move that guy around to get him the ball more. So I'm not sure which one of those guys. I think they all have the ability to be that guy. I don't know who it is going to be yet, but I don't think it's going to be quite like we saw last year. I think someone's going to step up and kind of be that Spurbeck or that Matt Miller or whoever. I think it'll be clear as the season progresses if this is the guy, or the Shakir. I think it'll be one of these guys, but I don't know who it's going to be.
There was some hope last season that Cobbs would step up and take that role, and it didn't necessarily end up materializing, but maybe this year is a little bit more experience. He is able to, but regardless who ends up taking that number one spot, someone I'm super excited about based on what we saw in spring ball last year and then on the field last season is Eric McAllister. 6'4", tall guy. He's got speed, he's got maneuverability, agility. The receiving touchdown he had versus North Texas, where he's able to split the defenders and go in for the touchdown. Maybe he doesn't become the number one guy this season, but do you see down the road Eric McAllister taking over that spot as the next elite Boise State wide receiver?
I think so. I think he's got the tools to do it for sure. And then, his big body frame, that's something that, you look back at some of the best receivers, they've kind of been that longer style player. And so I think he's got the makeup to be that guy. It should be really fun to see. I think he's kind of, I see a lot of those guys fairly equal. They all kind of do their own thing, but they're all kind of, like we said, receiver by committee last year. But he's a guy that I think kind of separate himself a little bit with his ability and his frame.
Now, the receiving game is going to always rely on the tight ends, but it's Boise State's way. They've always mixed them into the offense. And last season, we kind of saw the tight ends fall a little bit off the map. There were receptions, Smith, Hopper getting in the mix. But Hopper's gone. He's transferred out. He's over, I believe he went over to Michigan. I might have made a mistake there, but I believe he's over, or Michigan State. He's over at Michigan State now. Riley Smith, he's your reliable guy who's left, and he kind of had a little bit of a down year last season. Do you see Boise State being able to reestablish the tight ends this year? Riley Smith, Matt Lauder are guys that showed some excitement, and you've got some new guys coming in. Do you see Boise State being able to reestablish tight ends as part of this offense, or is it more of those receiver focus this year?
No, I think with Hamden's style, I think he'll bring those tight ends into the focus a little bit more. Riley Smith, how is he? He's a 5th year or 6th year guy. I feel like he's been there forever. I think he's going to have, I hope he has a breakout year. I hope he kind of brings that tight end mentality back into the offense for Boise State. I really like watching him play. And I think he was a former quarterback too, right? I think he started out as a quarterback. And so I kind of like that. And so I'm rooting for him. But I think with Hamden's offense, he's been around a long time and understands Boise State and the culture there. And tight ends have always been a really big part of the success of the offense. And so I hope that he brings that back into the table a little bit more. And my hope is that Smith can have a good year.
My personal hope is that they establish Riley Smith as a receiving weapon so that one pass, he can actually wind up and throw that thing down the field as a former quarterback. I've been rooting for that for like 5 years now, for us to see that Riley Smith quarterback, back pass option play, but hasn't happened yet. I'm hoping that this is the year we end up seeing it happen. But a big part of how Boise State's able to find success in the running game or the passing game is going to rely, like you talked about, on that offensive line, on those front guys. But it's been a struggle. It's been really kind of a bad unit with issues since 2019. This has been several years now. You've had different head coaches. You've had different multiple different offensive coordinators. You've brought in multiple different transfers, different unit setups, and nothing has seemed to fix the problem. What needs to change here? What needs to happen to restore this Boise State offensive line? Because you look at those Boise State teams, those great Boise State teams, and even your 2014 season, they were built around a solid line play. Especially that 2014 season, we started about changing the tempo going into the second half of the season. Part of that was the offensive line started playing really, really good there on the back end of that 2014 season. So what needs to happen? Is it a change of mentality? Is it just they haven't found the right formation? Is they not thrown the right players at it? What needs to happen to restore and improve this offensive line?
Yeah, I think the big thing with offensive line play and how historically they've been really solid is they've found a way to gel together really quickly, where they're consistent and they trust each other. And I think that's something that, whether that's injuries or whether that's moving guys around at different spots, consistency is huge with that front five. And so if they can find that early on and start gelling together and playing as one unit instead of like five individuals, I think that'll be the determining factor in how successful they are up front. But again, sometimes that takes a little bit. Sometimes that takes 2-3 weeks during the year to find that right formula. But I know the fans are getting a little impatient with finding that quicker. So, but with those guys up front, I think, just trust and consistency. If they can find that fast, I think that's really going to determine how successful they can be on offense. But it's nice having number 10 back there too. He can get you out of some problems. So that may save them a little bit early on.
That's true. And that leads perfectly into the 3 keys this season here for Boise State, because my number 1 key for my 3 keys this season is stay with the run game. I think there's a tendency of Boise State, you want to focus on that passing game, and that needs to be part of it. That's going to be part of Taylor Green's transition, is becoming more of that passing quarterback. And when you don't have a solid backup behind you, you want to protect that quarterback position. But if you take away Taylor Green's running, you take away a huge part of what makes him such a talented and successful quarterback. And if he's able to get some rushing yards, it improves his mentality, comes out a little bit more confident the next time he's able to go out and do something in the passing game. You talked about softening up the defenses. That running game needs to be part of that. This is one of the best running groups that I've ever seen at Boise State. You've got the 3 horsemen in there in Taylor Green, Genty, and Holani, and then who knows who's resting there in the back benches, of maybe a Dubar stepping up and being that 4th guy. So you have one of the most talented running games you've ever seen. You've got an uncertain, untested receiving group here. Some guys, nobody stepped up to be that number 1 yet. And you've got the most athletic quarterback Boise State's ever seen with a uncertain offensive line. Last year, when Boise State focused on the running game, that offensive line played well because the defenses didn't know what to do. They had to spread themselves out to stop that running game and also to stop the passing game. Boise State was able to run down their throats, put up 300-yard rushing games, even without having a solid and consistent offensive line. So my number 1 here is, I know Bush Hand is probably going to want to come back and restore a little bit more of that passing game, but you've got to keep the running game as a quintessential part of this offense. I'm not saying 60% run, 40% pass. I'm not saying become Army. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you have to keep the quarterback running game. You have to keep that focus on the running game going in this offense, a little bit more of an RPO, maybe a little bit of a different look than what we've seen at Boise State teams in the past, to be able to go out there and have success with the weapons that Boise State has. So that's my number 1 key. I don't know if you have any comments or directions you want to go on that before we move into number 2.
Yeah, no, that's my number 1 as well. Run game is essential for success on offense. If you can't run the ball, it's hard to do anything else. I think the old quote that I heard from Hars when I first got there was, "You run the ball to win, you pass it to score." And it's kind of true. If you can't run the ball, you're not going to win many games. The passing, that all comes with the run game, and that's how you get those explosive plays and long touchdowns. But it's going to start with that run game, and if they got that rolling, I have a hard time seeing anybody really stopping this offense if they can have success running the football.
And that's a big one for me too here, is in addition to running the game, it's don't focus in on one guy. That's my number 2 key, is because you have so many weapons here for Boise State. I don't want to see a Boise State team that comes out and starts to try to establish that one back mentality. I don't think it's going to happen. There's no way it does with 2 great backs here in Boise State, but I don't think that this team is built for that. I think this team is built with so many weapons in the backfield, so many weapons in the receiving game. I know we talk about having that number 1 guy establish themselves, but I would love to see Boise State develop multiple guys across the position of wide receiving game, continue to spread that ball around. I think that with what you have in the running game, you've got to see two backs. You got to see Helani and Genty splitting that 50-50. Maybe you tend with Helani a little bit more just because he's a senior, but you lose out on opportunities if you focus in only on the talents of one of these players, because both these guys have so much to bring to the table. And when you come to the receiving game, I think that if you go with just one guy, when there is a really deep wide receiving room, we talk about not one person necessarily standing out. I think that's because so many players are showing those opportunities. You have to keep spreading the ball around. I mean, McAllister, he's got that tall, deep threat, that Geraldo Boldevine-esque, get it down the field, long ball potential. Caples and Cobbs, they're your slot guys. You can get them out there on the fast passes and get them down the field, like Shane Rhodes kind of esque receiving game. And then Penry, from what his tape, he really excites me as kind of more of that reliable hands receiver for maybe those dig routes or that midfield passing. So I think Boise State, they need to find all of their options here in the running game and in the receiving game, and not necessarily just develop the one guy, which has been a trend with Boise State, and it's worked. But I think this year, having the multi-sets, running game and receiving game, it's really going to help Boise State find success.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's, when you look back at some of the really successful offenses and, Kellen's throwing to 7, 8, 9 different guys, in a game. And I think that's got to be a part of it. And I think that is something that Bush Hamden's going to bring to the table is how do we get other guys involved with different formations and concepts. I don't think we're going to see it just, let's try to get the ball to one guy. If that happens, I think that's going to really limit, what they can do offensively. I think the more they spread it around, you have a lot of weapons. Let's get them touches and see what they can do with it. And, keep defenses guessing, because there's a lot of different possibilities with these guys.
Well, and talking about those different possibilities and changing things up, that's my number 3 key here is change it up in the red zone. Boise State's red zone performance the last few years has not been great. 59 attempts last season, 51 scores, but only 35 of those were touchdowns. So 35 out of 59, it's only 59% of their drives ending in touchdowns within the red zone. Boise State's got to do something different there in the red zone. They need to maybe rely more on Green's legs, maybe go more to those trick plays, which we haven't seen Boise State use so much in the last few years. I know they've been trying to develop more of that routine offense, but the trick plays is part of Boise State history, and finding those opportunities in the red zone, that's really when it opens up to those trick play opportunities. And maybe just coming up with a completely different playbook for those red zone opportunities. Don't run the same offense, put them on their back foot. Boise State's got to do something different, because what's happening right now is not working. Boise State's got to start ending some more of these drives in touchdowns if they want to start establishing themselves and dominating again in this conference.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, one of the statistical goals that we always had was you're going to score 100% of the time in the red zone, and 70% of the time you got to score touchdowns. And so they got to raise that number quite a bit. And historically they've done a good job with that, and they have changed their offense. Sometimes you go from a spread, you get down to the red zone, it's double tight, 2 backs, and it's just, let's figure out a way to score touchdowns. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for them. And, field goals are nice. Field goals are fine, get points on the board, but touchdowns is going to what I think separates this team from last year's team. And then to complement that with some situational football, I think third downs will improve as well. I hope. I think you said it was around 30%, something like that, which isn't necessarily the best. So finding ways, and, the big part with that is, staying out of the third and long situations. And I think Taylor's ability to run the football a little bit will help that. But if you can get a manageable 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 scenario, that will help that as well. But the situational type football of third downs, red zone, getting positive yards on first down plays, and just being efficient, when you do get in the red zone to score touchdowns, I think it's a small fix, but it's going to make a really big difference in the productivity of this offense.
Well, Bush Hamden definitely has his work cut out for him, with a team that went through 2 different offensive coordinators last year, really hasn't necessarily found their identity yet. But on the other hand, he has so many weapons he's going to be able to bring to this table. Like I said, this is a historic team when you talk about the offense that they return to the field. So whatever he wants to do, he has all the creativity in the world to play with here, because he has so much that he's able to work with. So just some final predictions here for Boise State. I've got 3 real quick ones, and then I'll let you end up with any predictions you want to go. Maybe throw out a rec prediction if you want to. But my number one here is I think Boise State will end up just short of the 2,000-yard rushers, like you said, because I just think there's so many guys that are going to be taking that ball in the running game. So I think they'll probably end up with one guy in the 1,200-ish range like we saw last year, and one guy maybe in the high 800s, kind of like we saw last season as well. I think I agree with you. Green rushes for 600 plus, and I think he gets close to that 3,000 yards passing. I think he gets 2,500 plus passing yards this season. As he completes the picture, maybe we're not seeing full his potential yet. I think we'll probably have to wait till our 3rd year to see everything that he can bring to the table, but he definitely makes the 2nd year transition gracefully. And then my final prediction here is that I think Boise State attempts a little bit of a return to its traditional roots here. I do think the running game is continue to play a heavy role, but I think we'll see a little bit more of an emphasis on Green's passing game, and maybe a little bit less of a focus on his running game, maybe just leaving the legs for some situational football or for some, breakdown, got to escape kind of opportunities, as Boise State relies on their primary backs here in Green, as they're in Genty and Polani, and starts to develop Taylor Green's arm. That's my final predictions here. I'll leave it to you to wrap up, and if you want to throw out any final predictions or record prediction, feel free to.
Yeah, no, I agree with all your predictions. I think it's going to be fun to watch. I think, as they move forward, there's a lot of weapons and a lot of really cool things that can happen with this offense. And I think it's going to get back to that traditional Boise State style that I think fans are used to seeing. But it's going to look different with some of the athletes that are out there. Haven't had a quarterback quite like this one to be able to run that. So that's going to be fun to see. In terms of like an overall record, I think they're going to push for that double-digit wins again. I think it's going to be really tough. They got a really tough slate of non-conference games. And I think offensively, as long as that O-line can gel together fast, I think they're going to be pretty good. I think, you look back at historically some of the really good teams there, they've had a really, really good defense. And I think the defense is going to be good. They're just really young and inexperienced. So I think going into UW game 1 against a top 10 opponent, really good offense, that's going to be a tough one. You got UCF coming to town. That's going to be tough. You got Memphis. I mean, there's some really physical teams they're going to play if they can stay healthy and be able to move the ball. I think like with your predictions, I think they're going to be pushing that 10 win, hopefully plus season again. But I think that's their potential. I'm excited to see it happen, and it'd be fun to get back to a big bowl game again. I think they have the tools to do it. Got to have a little luck and stay healthy.
Well, hopefully we end up seeing that result at the end of the season. This is the final year of that New Year's Six format before we move into the expanded playoff system. So it's going to be a completely different look here in 2024. But 2023, last chance. Boise State opened up the new New Year's Six format by going and winning the first ever bowl game, your 2014 season. Can they wrap up this period of college football before we move into the new things by getting the final one? It'd be a great one to see. I'm not going to throw out my predictions yet. I'll save those for our final video at the end of this preview series. But this has been a great discussion. Thank you so much for coming on and bringing your perspective. Of course, obviously, it's a great perspective as a former quarterback, but also as a current coach here at the high school level. You're still staying as part of the game and keeping up with it. And so your perspective here has been incredibly valuable. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your perspective here, being part of this discussion. Everybody make sure that you like and subscribe, because there's going to be more videos like this coming out. I'll have a preview for the special teams and the defense coming out, and I'll be wrapping all of it up with my record prediction, where I'll go through every single game for Boise State and predict the results for the season. So thank you, everybody, for being part of this. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much, Grant, for coming on. And before I end with my traditional closing here, I'll let you say any final words you got.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It's awesome to talk Boise State football. It's in my blood, always will be. Huge supporter, and appreciate people like you and everyone listening and watching that loves Boise State football. We all have that in common, and go Broncos.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on, everybody. Thanks for sticking to the end. And as always, go Big Blue.